my candle going with me blocking it? Well, it's there, just so you know. Okay, I'm so excited to film this video because I have had the best reading month of my entire life. In October, I've read 7 books, which I know isn't anything crazy to many readers out there. I think 7 books is my record in a month. I've just been in such a reading mood and I've just been reading such good books, and I just cannot wait to share them all with you, because if you haven't read any of these, you need to. Out of the 7 books, there's been 3 5-stars this month, so it's been good. I want my coffee. Recently I've been making homemade coffees and then just reusing an old Starbucks cup, and it has been making me so happy. Like, I haven't actually gone out and gotten a new Starbucks in like 4 or 5 days now, yet I feel like I'm having one every single day. Anyway, it's a super windy, cold day, so I feel just so excited to be sitting here with my candle lit in the background and just to sit here chatting about 7 incredible books. Which order did I read these in? It doesn't really matter, actually. I do remember I started with this book first in October. It's Tomorrow, Tomorrow and Tomorrow. If you watched one of my weekly vlogs a couple of weeks ago, I'll pop the thumbnail here just for reference. I was reading this book in that vlog, so I talk a lot of it. I talk way more about my feelings throughout the book in that video. When I first finished it, I gave it a 4.5 stars, and then upon a few days of reflection, I bumped it up to a 4.75, and now after like 3 or 4 weeks after finishing it, I bumped it up to a 5. I just think this book couldn't have gotten anything less than a 5. Like, this book just deserved a 5-star. I feel like it's almost hard to explain it, and I've seen an interview of the author, Gabrielle Zevin, I didn't mention, saying that she almost doesn't know how to describe this book because you just have to read it. It's hard to explain what this book is about. On the back it says, this is a story of Sam and Sadie. It's not a romance, but it is about love. It's set over like a 10-year period, and you basically just experience life and growth and grief, success and failures and everything with these 2 characters. And it's just, I feel like it's one of those books that when it hits you. Just like the way it is written was like poetic to me. It just so perfectly described life and how people have their flaws and how life is so messy, and how different people's perspectives are valid in their own way. It's just so good, and I feel like I walked into it basically completely blind, so I almost feel like that's kind of the best way to go into it. This was just a wild ride. People told me before I started reading it that it was going to break my heart and put it back together again. It certainly did that. Did it put it back together? I'm not sure. I think this is just one of those books that I just have continued to think about weeks and weeks after, and I think I probably will continue to do that because it just had so many things in it that I just think are so fascinating and things that you can relate to in your life. It's just like so real. Like, it honestly feels like these people are real. Like I was reading a true story. Like, they create games, then there's different characters that come in and out of their lives and that are really significant in their lives and that are not. But it's also so much more than that. So that just feels like it doesn't do this book justice. Also, all of us girls in the book club gave this a 5-star. And I feel like each one of us has very different reading styles. I feel like that's saying a lot. What did I read next? I think next I had a couple of books that I was reading at the same time. It doesn't matter what order I read them in. I'm just gonna talk about these. Next I read Powerless by Elsie Silver, which is the first book in the Chestnut Springs series, which is like a small town cowboy romance vibes. I've heard a lot of good things about this. I picked it up ages ago, but recently, actually quite a lot this month, I've just been feeling like reading romance. I think between like hard-hitting books like Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow and some other fantasy, which I'll talk about soon, I've just been wanting something that's a little bit more of like a palette cleanser, so I thought I'd pick this book up. Why do I have book amnesia? And I think because I just read this one, I'm like forgetting parts of this one. Okay, yes. Basically, this is about a bull rider, Rhett, who he's extremely talented, one of the best in his field, until something kind of happens and he really like taints his image. So his manager sends someone to kind of like keep him supervised, basically just to have full-time supervision on him to make sure that his image doesn't get ruined, because this is coming up to like a really big competition. Rhett's manager sends out his daughter Summer to go and supervise Rhett. Obviously it's a romance, so you can kind of see the vibes of where things head. I rated this a 3 stars in the end, and I did say this in one of my recent vlogs. I feel like this series to me is like trashy, but I love it. It's almost like so bad that it's good. Like, there's definitely bits in it that I'm like, oh, I just think I'm all down for a little bit of spice, but sometimes I'm like, oh, it's just a bit much. I feel like these books kind of have that. Like, I would say they're very, very spicy books. So if you're in the mood for that, this is going to be great for you. But I feel like just the overall vibes of the cowboy setting and like the small town, I really enjoyed, and I love like the family, especially in this book, which is the second one, which is about Rhett's brother and then Summer's best friend Willa. We really get like family vibes, and they have like family dinners. The family's just like really connected, and I think I love that a lot, which makes me just like love the series. I will also say something I loved about these books, and I think it's just Elsie Silver's writing, but it is so easy to read and so easy and quick to binge. Like I think I finished both of these in like 3 or 4 sittings because I just sit down and I read like easily 100 pages. It's just like super fast paced, super easy to read, like big text, and I just feel like I fly through these. So yeah, I gave Flawless a 3-star, and then I've just finished this like 20 minutes ago, but I think I'm gonna go with a 3.5 for this one. And I'm not sure if it's just because I'm like jumping back into the world, so the world is familiar and the characters are familiar, and I liked that we got more of like the family in this because I'm like, I knew the characters from here, and then we got more into it, if that makes sense. I feel the same about some of the scenes being a bit much. Just like some lines that I feel like both of these men have said, I've been a bit like, oh, it's just a miss for me, but like the overall vibes just make it up. Again, it's so bad it's good, and like some parts I'm like, no, but then I also sit down and read it in a few sittings because I just fly through the pages and I just love the vibes. But yeah, this one is about Cade, Rhett's brother, who is a single dad. Cade needs someone to look after Luke, his son, for the summer. So Summer, the girl Summer, basically ropes her best friend into being a nanny for Luke. But I really enjoyed the ending of this one. I think it was really done well the whole time. Sometimes in romances I'm sitting there being like, literally, if you would just talk to each other, all of your problems would be over and this wouldn't be a problem. What I liked about this one is that I feel like their feelings were valid, and it wasn't really the case of like a miscommunication. It was more so a case of like, no, like this actually kind of makes sense and would be the case in real life, if that makes sense. Anyway, I gave it a 3.5 stars. Again, think I did enjoy them the same amount. I just think I enjoyed the familiarity of this world. So I'm very excited to continue the series. I think there's another 2 in the series, so I will be picking them up. They've been great palette cleansers for me. Just like a great quick read, really. This next book I'm still processing. And it is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I needed about 5 to 7 business days to process the ending of this one. I think this potentially has to be one of my favorite books I've ever read. I said it. This book had me physically getting butterflies and physically giggling. Essentially, it's a fantasy. It's set in this world that has just had a plague, which has kind of like divided humanity into either elites who have powers or ordinaries who didn't get powers. The ordinaries are killed because the elites see them as like a disease and that they'll weaken the powers of the elites. And our main character, Peyton, is an ordinary. Peyton, her whole life has been pretending to be an elite, or really a mundane, who are not killed because they do have powers, but they're seen as not like very useful powers, so they're called mundane. The prince, who is an elite, comes into town and basically gets like attacked, and Peyton saves him, which then gets her put in the purging trials with a bunch of other elites, but she's an ordinary. So it's kind of a whole thing of like, okay, how is she going to survive the trials without giving away that she's an ordinary? The romance portion of it has to be the best romance I've ever read. The prince, she saves Kai. His whole job in the kingdom is to kill ordinaries, and he's also in the trials. They kind of like team up. Like, she's saved him obviously outside of the trials, so they kind of like team up and help each other. And actually, can't even explain. All of these folded down pages are times where I was just like, oh, I just think Kai is one of the best men I've ever read in books. The banter between Kai and Peyton has to be the best I've ever read. Not once in this book was I cringed by the romance. Every single thing that he said and that she said, I was just like obsessed with. Just want to find like literally everything that I underlined and read it out, but like I won't do that to you. I just want to read it again already. If it hasn't been obvious, this is a clear 5-star for me, like without a doubt. I feel like within the first few pages I was like, I'm already obsessed with the writing style of it, and then the storyline was amazing, and then the characters were amazing. I didn't feel like it dragged at all, which is like, it's quite a chunky book. The world building, because it's obviously a fantasy, I feel like it was very, very, very easy to understand, especially because it is kind of similar to the Hunger Games. I feel like it was very easy to grasp everything that was going on. Just obsessed. If you haven't read this book, part of me is like, don't do it to yourself, because the next book doesn't come out to, I think, July next year. The way this ended sat with me for days. Like, a book has never made me feel emotionally like kind of heartbroken before to this extent. I don't know why it did it with this book, but it just did. This was also my Instagram book club's book of the month for October. I discussed a lot more of my thoughts as I was reading it in that. Pretty sure our book for November is going to be Once Upon a Broken Heart. The next book I read was a reread of one of my favorite series in the world, Magnolia Parks. This is the first book in the Magnolia Parks universe, the Magnolia Parks series. It was a 5 stars, obviously. Loved rereading, and I loved noticing all of the little hints that we get throughout this book that you find answers for in the 3rd book. Now knowing, I'm like, oh my gosh, there was so much said. Even like what you find out at the end of this book, there's so many times and so many little hints that you get. Just loved like reading it again, knowing how everything played out. Just having the box set in my life again, I was obsessed with. I have talked about the series so much on my channel, so I really feel like I'm like sounding like a broken record. But all I'll say is high society London, rich people drama, toxic relationships. If you like Gossip Girl, I think you'll love this series. Next we have The 7-Year Slip, which is about... Why am I so bad at describing books? It's about this girl called Clementine. She's recently just lost her aunt, who she was very, very close to. She moves into her aunt's apartment, and then one random day she finds this complete stranger in her apartment because the apartment has slipped back 7 years, which I just think is a really cool concept to start off with a book. And as much as it's a romance book, I almost feel like it definitely was just that like general fiction in the way that you go through a lot of her thoughts with her career and grief, and I think it's just done in a really, really good way. Anyway, so yeah, there's this man in her apartment and she's like, literally, what is going on? And all of her aunt's furniture and everything from 7 years ago is back. So she's just like moved out all of this furniture and now she's like back. And there's this man that's like, oh, your aunt told me that I could stay in her apartment while she's off traveling. But the apartment can slip in and out of this past whenever it like wants to, essentially. So when she leaves, she doesn't know if when she comes back, it'll be her new apartment that she set up or the apartment 7 years ago with this man staying in it. I gave this a 4.5 stars. I loved this book. The only reason that I didn't bump it up to the 5 was because I feel like the first maybe third I wasn't obsessed with it. For the last 2/3 ish I was obsessed with it. What I want to say will give away what happens in the book. The second half of this book I could not put down. It's also only like 320 something pages, so it's a very short read, but like it was just written in a way that I was just obsessed with. I loved the love interest, like a lot, especially in the second half. I folded down some pages because again there was some lines that just like hit when I read them. Really just loved the characters, I loved the themes. My only complaint is the nickname. It wasn't my favorite, but I looked past it because I loved it anyway. Last but not least, we have 5 Survive, which was actually the October book of Rach, George and I's little book club. Rach picked this for all of us and I'd never heard of this book, so I was very, very excited and intrigued to read it. It is a YA thriller, mystery? A YA thriller. I just want to read the back because I feel like it's going to be the easiest way and then I can elaborate from it. It says, you can't see me, but I can see you. If you try to run, I will shoot. Red Kenny is on a road trip with 5 friends when their RV breaks down in the middle of nowhere. This is no accident. Someone is out there and someone wants one of them dead. With 8 hours until dawn, the 6 friends must escape or work out which one of them is the target. Buried secrets will be forced to light and not everyone will survive the night. What I also loved about this book is it's broken up into the hours of the night. So I think it starts at 11 p.m. and I think it finishes at 6 a.m. I ended up giving this book a 3.5, I think. I really enjoyed it. I think it did what it needed to do for a YA thriller. Like it was fast paced. When we found out the secret, it was in my last vlog, like I was shocked. I did not see the twist coming at all. I didn't love the main character, and then obviously 6 friends, and one of the other characters annoyed and angered me so much, which is obviously the point of the character, but I loved finding out each secret, and there's kind of like this like pressure and this time limit. I just feel like it feels like a 3.5 to me. Like it's not something I'm really gonna think about. And the main character kind of bugged me a little bit, but I did enjoy the mystery of it and like finding out things. I think though, as much as I was like so shocked and I wasn't expecting the ending, I was kind of like, whoa, okay. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't thinking about it much afterwards. I was just kind of like, okay. It's like I almost didn't really care much. Like I did when I was reading it, but then I also kind of didn't. It just feels like a 3.5 to me. I would definitely recommend it because it was very fast paced. Like I enjoyed most of it. I feel like some points maybe dragged a little bit for me, but I would recommend it if you're in the mood for a thriller and a mystery and trying to find out secrets and all that. This is also the author who wrote A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I'm really intrigued to read. But those were the 7 books that I read in October. I hope you enjoyed hearing me chat about them. If you've read any of them, please let me know what your ratings were or what you thought. I'm gonna go put all these books back on my bookshelf. I think the most satisfying thing about reading is finishing a book and then popping it on your bookshelf. So thanks very much for watching me sit down and chat about books for the last however long, and I will see you next time.